Hi, I'm Julia. I'm part of the team of the Virtual Reality and Tourism blog, and today I invite you to join me for some talks about virtual reality and the effects of the corona pandemic crisis. Let's go. Hi, Daniel.
Hello, so here we are, Julia. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you doing?
Also fine, thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank you for taking the time. And as we are meeting in digital space, I would like to ask you where you are physically located right now.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm currently physically located in Salzburg, Austria.
Nice. So that's also where I've studied, but now I'm back in Vorarlberg in West Austria. But thanks to digital solutions, we're able to meet anyways.
That's great. And there's no risk of like contagious diseases that we could infect each other. So
Exactly, exactly. So I would like to invite you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to virtual reality and why this topic is of special interest for you.
I'm Daniel, I'm 24 years old, and I just submitted my master thesis. And I'm I wrote my master thesis about the use of VR to travel virtually. And more precisely, it was in connection with the current situation, the coronavirus. So I took the chance that people couldn't travel to figure out an alternative way of traveling, which is VR. And this was of special interest for me because I'm a very tech savvy person. And I have always liked the idea of transforming yourself into another world, like you're being immersed into a virtual reality. And throughout my whole study, I've always written paper about VR. And so this was no big surprise for me that my master thesis would also be about VR and its application in tourism.
And have you used virtual reality for yourself as well already?
Yes, but not often. So my first times really figuring out how it works was during the university. And yeah, I also have used it to travel virtually, which was also very interesting. And it's also impressive how many different devices there are and what different specifications they have and how it alters your experience eventually in the end.
Mm. And where did you travel virtually?
That's an interesting question. And that is also very cool about VR that you can travel anywhere you want. You can just imagine any place you want to go. You type it into YouTube, for example, search a 360-degree video, and you can jump right into place Egypt, Cairo, wherever you want to be, or just on the Bahamas and having a small cocktail on the beach. There are no limitations, and it's very cost inexpensive. And I have been to many different places. I've been to Sweden, to Mexico, to Italy, to Croatia, and Japan. I've been everywhere already, which is nothing I can say about my real traveling, but well, we will see what comes.
And did you travel virtually to all those places during the corona lockdown or during the pandemic crisis now, or have you already done it before that?
No, that's also a good question. I have never done it before, and this interest only came during the coronavirus, where also the idea was created that, oh, okay, VR could be more than just a entertainment method or just a game station. And it just sparked in me that, okay, VR is also capable of maybe replacing travel. So I took this chance and figured out, okay, let's write a master's thesis about it. But no, I have never used it before to travel virtually, just during the COVID-19 case. And I have to admit, which is also an interesting result, which I will tell you about later, that I don't use it anymore because, very simple answer, well, you can more or less travel domestically again, which for me kind of negates the need of virtual traveling.
Mm. Okay. But because you also mentioned you will tell me later on a little bit more about the results, so maybe we can start off with that you tell us now more about your research topic in general.
Yes. So, as I already mentioned, it was about the use of VR to replace travel during the COVID-19 situation. And before that, just to tell you more about how I came to this whole scenario, because this is, well, nothing that just I had in mind for a few years. No, it happened spontaneously before. I actually wanted to do a study about how virtual reality is able to provide mobility impaired travelers in wheelchairs a travel experience at the destination, because there are so many places, even here in Salzburg, that are not barrier free. So there are steep stairs, for example, or just barriers where people cannot access the destination. So my idea was, okay, maybe tourism providers, tourism managers could provide a small stand where they have VR headsets and let the handicapped tourists still just experience the attraction anyway, even though they could not access it physically. So this was my initial idea. But then when I tried to do the interviews, the COVID-19 lockdown came and I couldn't recruit the people anymore. And it didn't make any sense to do it online because those mobility impaired people didn't have VR headsets. Mm-hmm. So I changed my topic, and I think this is a once in a lifetime chance to do the research about the COVID-19 impact on VR. And I have gathered my participants through different social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Reddit, Discord, to find enough people who, and that was a very important requirement of the study, who owned a VR headset, because my study required the people to watch a video in 360 degrees. And it lasted 2 minutes and 30 seconds, I think. And it was also about just jumping around in different destinations, having amazing views on different locations. And there was no narrator in the background, just music, very relaxing. And this was the sample and the whole process of it. So they had this video and they watched it. And for my study, I used the technology acceptance model because I wanted to test whether people would use it as a travel substitute, as mentioned. So I used the technology acceptance model and extended it by 2 additional variables, namely risk perception and presence. And well, in the end, maybe we can just go to the results now, because I'm not sure if I'm missing anything. If I'm missing anything, just tell me. So from methodology to results.
Can I maybe interrupt you for 1 second here?
Yes.
Thank you. Maybe for our viewers who are not aware of the technology acceptance model, could you please share just shortly with us all the variables of the model?
Okay, so the technology acceptance model basically tests on an individual level how people are perceiving technology, whether it's useful or not. And the model employs different variables. So the first variable that is used is the perceived ease of use, which means how easy is the system to use. And obviously a hypothesis is the easier to use the system, the higher the acceptance it is to use it for the future purposes. So this was one variable. And then there's also the variable perceived usefulness, which suggests that well, it's the perceived use. It's just very simple. So if people say, okay, VR has no use for me because it's not imaginable, but if they say, I don't like travel anyway, so I don't see any use in using VR to travel virtually, then the perceived usefulness would be very low. So this is the next variable. And then there's also the variable behavioral intention. And this is where everything comes together. It's about whether people would use it in the future. It's their intention to use it furthermore. And this model basically connects all those dots together and tests, okay, is the behavioral intention increasing if the other variables are increasing? But I have extended the model by 2 additional variables, as mentioned, the risk perception. And the risk perception was about the perception how risky it is to travel domestically and internationally right now, which was during the COVID-19 virus. Because my assumption was if people perceive traveling, real traveling, very risky, maybe their intention to use the VR as a travel substitute would be higher. So, and obviously presence also played a very significant role in this model, because I also assumed, based obviously on literature, that the higher the presence is, the higher their behavioral intention is to use the VR device to travel virtually. So this is the technology acceptance model in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Yes. um,
One more question before we
yes,
start with
please.
the results. Can you also give us a short description of the sample you had so that we can get an idea about that?
Yes, so I recruited 193 participants, and they were from all over the world. So the age group ranged really from 16 to 50 something. And this is obviously a limitation of my study, because I could not recruit people personally. I had to rely on online methods of recruiting people. My initial idea would have been to test each individual with the same device and the same circumstances, like a laboratory setting. But obviously, during the COVID-19, this was not given. I couldn't do that. So I have, on the one hand, a very heterogeneous group, but on the other hand, I also have a very homogeneous group, because I, as I already mentioned, required the people to have owned a VR headset and to use it. So this means this group already knew how to use the VR headset in advance. They have used it before, I don't know how many, several times. And this resulted in the mean of, for example, I asked the question about how familiar they are with the VR headsets, and the mean was very high, which means everyone already knew how it worked. And yeah, this is basically my sample.
Thank you. And now we're all curious to learn more about your results.
Yes, so I can just connect dots about the homogeneous sample. So this was one interesting finding. The first finding was that even though people already had a lot of experience in using VR headsets, they found my 2D video, there was just a 2D video, very immersive anyway. So the presence and the immersion was on the mean very high as well. But I have also received a lot of feedback from the participants, and many of them were saying that only the usage of 2D 360-degree videos that is not stereoscopic is not as immersive as, for example, a user-generated environment, computer-generated environment in a 3D interactive environment. So on the one hand, yes, presence was very high, but the qualitative part, I didn't really do a qualitative part, but the feedback was qualitative, obviously, suggested that, yes, presence could be higher. And this was the first finding. And the second finding was that risk perception, interestingly, did not have an impact on the final idea that people would use VR to substitute travel. And the reasons there, I don't know how many folds, there could be hundreds of reasons. It's hard to dig into them. But the most important finding for this study was, yes, people would use VR to travel virtually during the COVID-19 virus. And this was very interesting for me, because I did not expect it. And it says a lot about the potential that VR currently offers for people who are in their lockdown.
Mm. And do your findings also say something that the device that has been used or is used for the virtual travel has a big impact or influence on the experience itself? So that, I don't know, the part of the sample who had better devices or more capable devices are more likely to use it for virtual travel?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is also a very good question. The thing is, as you said, it is really hard to figure out why this result is the way it is. I did a pilot study. There has been a research about the same topic, but it went back 20 years in time. It was done in the early 2000s, and the results were not significant, and they were using the very first head-mounted displays that were available. So my study couldn't focus on all the different factors that could influence the outcome. Yes, obviously the use device had an impact. Even the gender maybe had an impact. Even the type of traveler there had an impact. Maybe the age group even had an impact. So there are so many factors that you have to consider during the study, but this would exploded my whole questionnaire into 100 plus pages. So I could not really focus on all those different things. I did a pilot study in this sense. And if I'm thinking back, if I have to redo the study, or if I had to redo the study, I would focus on presence. I would split up presence and immersion based on what headset was used. What latency is it? Is it a 3D generated environment, or are you using a 2D video? Is there any interactive parts in this, well, exposure? Is there even maybe social interaction? Is it like a multiplayer experience? So there's so many different things. And I think if you really would break it down to just presence and immersion, whether they have an impact on whether VR is seen as a travel replacement, I think the results would be very different. Very different in the meaning that, like, my study would not be valid anymore, because if we have the difference between 2D videos and 3D environments, obviously the 3D environments would be in favor for it, because they're more interactive, they're more immersive, they're more present, like people are feeling more present in this environment, as study have already tested. So yes, there are a lot of things that still have to be done. And this is also something for future researchers that are building upon this study. There are many things that you can extend this initial idea on, but as far as for now, this was just a very general pilot study to see whether there's even the slightest chance of having VR as a tool to replace travel. But yeah, there are many things that are still lacking that I have also received as a feedback. And I think unless VR is not capable of addressing very other multi-sensory information besides auditive and visual stimulation, it's very hard to see VR as an actual replacement rather than a complement.
Mm. And I mean, now you've already touched upon the topic, because my next question would have been if you're planning to do some more research on your own, or what your research recommendations would be. So the recommendations you have already mentioned. And now I would like to ask you if you're planning yourself to conduct more research in this area.
Yes, I mean, I would be very interested to do so. And on the one hand, yes, if I have the time, because I'm working full-time currently, so this is one of the issues. But on the other hand, it's also hard to really redo this research, because after the lockdown ended, the sample is different. People don't have the mindset anymore, like traveling is different or is difficult right now, because maybe traveling is allowed at this time again. But obviously it's still stuck in the heads of the people. People are maybe still more cautious about traveling. So I would do it if I have the time, but I would do it differently.
Based on the experiences you have and learnings you have made now.
Exactly, based on, especially on the feedback that I have received. People were so helpful in a sense, because I have talked to many developers as well, and they gave me a lot of interesting feedback and suggestions for the research, just as I've mentioned, to include more variables, or just to break it down to just a few, because there are so many. And this would definitely be something that future research could consider when doing a similar study.
And this question is now not precisely about your research, but it's more about your personal opinion. Do you think that now, due to the pandemic situation, that also the tourism industry or the tourism providers have gained more interest in providing VR experiences?
Well, hard to say. I really hope they do. So far, I have not really seen too much of an acceptance of VR, but in the VR niche, it's booming, really. We can see it in the numbers. There have been so many more sold VR devices, and developers are currently working on so many interesting tourism projects. For example, I've talked to some people who are developing an interactive heritage tourism with role-playing elements, or multi-group virtual traveling in a multiplayer experience. There are so many interesting things that are happening right now in the developer scene. It's just a question when the VR tourism providers, only the tourism providers, the DMOs, when they realize that there's so much potential for VR. And yes, I do think it has gained more importance during the coronavirus and also more attention. And I can imagine that it's going to be implemented in the future for tourism purposes, yes.
Thank you for your opinion. I have the feeling we could talk for 30 more
Yeah,
minutes on this topic. It's really interesting. But I would like to thank you for your time and your insights into your research. And as you told us in the beginning that you just submitted your master thesis, this means that you will soon have your master exam. And I would like to wish you all the best for that. And I'm crossing my fingers. And thanks for your
thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.